Welcome to the Proof Point Podcast, where we decode digital success one click at a time. We share key takeaways fueled by data and insights that your team can implement today to drive growth. Now, let's get started.
This is Stacey Porter-Bilger, your host for the Proof Point Podcast, where I feature thought leaders in the digital space, sharing marketing, data tactics, AI insights, and sales strategies that kickstart growth in a rapidly changing digital world. This episode is brought to you by Proof Digital. Proof Digital is a strategic and creative performance marketing agency, partnering with companies and organizations to create data-fueled marketing campaigns and tactics that drive growth and deliver tangible ROI. Visit proofdigital.com to learn more. Before I introduce our guest today, I do want to do a shout out to Noah Tanzanier with Rise 25 and Jeremy with Rise 25 too, as well, to who I work closely with on the Proof Point Podcast. Rise 25 helps B2B businesses connect with their Dream 25 clients, referral partners using podcasts. Our guest today is Ben Freda. Ben is a California native. Moved to New York City for law school after a short and inadvisable stint as a big law firm attorney. He jumped ship and began a career working with nonprofits on web technology. Now he runs BFC Digital, an agency that helps nonprofit organizations thrive on the web through exceptional web design, robust web development, and friendly web support. Thanks for joining us today, Ben.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great.
Awesome. I really appreciate you giving us your time and giving some insights to, especially some of the nonprofits in our community and those who we serve. I know you've got a decades experience in serving this community. So if you could just tell a little bit about your company and what you do.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to talk to you. We do web design development support for nonprofit organizations. We've been doing it for about 10 years. As I think a lot of people in the nonprofit / social change space, it started just as a kind of labor of love and has turned into an actual little company. It's been a great sort of ride, getting to know people in the space and doing the work, just trying to help people out. It's really fun.
Yeah, and helping people out. I mean, obviously, the nonprofit space, that niche that you picked, is all about community and elevating those who, are serving. So can you expand a little bit more on why nonprofits is the niche that you really focused on and helping on the digital space? Because I think that's really important.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, I've kind of asked myself that too in the past.
Sure.
And this is like going to immediately become a TMI podcast. But I often think that like the stuff we choose as adults in terms of where we go with our careers is really based on, childhood or our past or who we grew up to be or whatever.
Right.
And, I grew up in California and in kind of a milieu where everybody was in either progressive circles or sort of my parents were hippies and stuff like that. And
you went to Stanford, right? Did you go to Stanford?
I did. And yeah, there was a lot of tech going on in Stanford as well, at the time. I mean, I graduated in 2000. And by the time I graduated, Google was a company. But while I was in college, the guys that started Google were grad students. And so there was a lot of talk about was like the first tech bubble, Yeah. So there was a lot of talk about, what Google was going to be and what was going on in the tech space in Silicon Valley at the time. Yeah. So I was really interested in the technology stuff. But again, growing up in the area and then just the way childhood worked out, you really weren't, at least me, we were sort of taught you're not really meant to go out and make a bunch of money on your own, or, you know what I mean? You shouldn't, we sort of felt guilty about that. and then, or have been taught to feel guilty about that. And it's always a struggle, right? Because I'm running a company. I need the company to make money. We have employees that rely on it. We have healthcare insurance.
Totally get that one.
Yeah. And yet we're sort of in this milieu where, we're more interested, we're supposed to be focused on making the world a better place, so I'm trying to sort of marry those two things. So that's a long answer, but and sort of a weird one, I guess, but it's sort of based on, childhood, I think, and where I grew up and stuff like that.
Right. Well, I mean, I know one of our values is to be the change. And, the one way you do that is to prop up those who are down and working in, I don't know, at the community level, right at the ground level of various issues. So, and they oftentimes don't have that talent to on the technology side to really elevate. And so they need to rely on folks like yourself.
I mean, that's the other reason I really like working in this space is because most of our clients, and I mean, the individuals that we work with are usually accidental techies. So they are people that are in the communications department of a nonprofit or started a nonprofit. And they know they need a website. They know web technology can be a real game changer for them. They need something that works. They need something that's good, but they aren't techies. Like they don't know how to code. They don't know what HTML is. They might know a little bit and have had to learn a little bit from time to time, but maybe they're in charge of the website because they just happen to be like the youngest person. You know what I mean? Or they happen to know how to use Google Docs or whatever. And so they're like, you're in charge of,
you're in
you
charge.
Can use Google Docs, you get to do the
and
website.
Social media and all those other things.
And and social media and all the digital marketing stuff. And also, you also have to run our Zoom events, because you know how to use Zoom. You know what I mean? So we have a lot of people at these organizations who are they just want to do their best for the world and, help stop climate change or help migrants or whatever. And they're like, oh my God, I have all this stuff to learn. Technology is pretty crazy and changing all the time. And look, now there's AI you have to worry about.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they're not even, they're really educated in the communication space or the marketing space or the design space or something. And so that's the most rewarding part of the job is helping people who are kind of freaked out by what has to happen, who are themselves dedicated to helping the world, changing the world. Helping those people is really what we want to do.
Right. And on the technology side, I mean, as you know, dotting your I's and crossing your T's are so important when it comes to the website itself. I mean, just that piece right there. And if they don't, there's a lot of bad things that can happen if they don't. So what are some tips? What are like a couple tips that you might say, okay, hey, if you don't have this taken care of, you're going to get hacked. You're going to, and then you're going to spend all your energy on that instead of your cause.
Yeah, totally. So there's about 75 of those things that you should be doing.
Yes, there are. But just give a couple.
Yeah. So one of the things we do as a company is we do support. So nonprofits who don't have a web developer on their staff, as many nonprofits don't, they will hire us on a monthly basis just to help them, and it can be as little as just maintaining the website, making sure things are safe, all the way to sort of changing little bits every month, or maybe making major changes every month or whatever. But there are 3 things that you gotta do. Oh my God! And so many people don't do these 3 things, and then they end up, like you're saying, something falls off a cliff, and they end up wasting a week on this,
or lose stuff.
So number one thing you got to do, you got to be monitoring your uptime. So there are great online services that will ping your website every minute, every 2 minutes, and see if it's up. Now, in the olden days, the site used to go down and you'd have to go in and fix it and put it back up. Now, that doesn't usually happen anymore because as long as you're using a reputable host, it's generally going to not go down and not go back up. But you will be able to determine your uptime over time. So you'll know if you're getting, you're supposed to be getting 5 nines, which is 99.999% uptime. If you're getting 99.998, that's probably fine. If you're getting 99.0 or 0.4, then you're talking about multiple hours of downtime a month. And so in that case, you're really risking losing traffic, losing eyeballs, losing supporters, losing, maybe your executive director has a meeting with the board and is showing them something, and maybe the website doesn't load during that meeting. Everyone looks terrible. So you want to be evaluating that over time. And if you're getting low numbers, there's something wrong. I mean, either the host is messed up, or there's some code issue on your website or something that you need to get looked into. If you don't do that, then in 3 months, you're going to have a big problem. So that's number one, is uptime. This is going to go on for a while, but
it's okay. No, hey, that's what, I mean, the dotting the I's and crossing T's stuff is, even though it's not sexy, I mean, to be truthful, it is critical. And we understand that. So what's number two?
Number two is you got to be updating your website. So a lot of our nonprofits are using WordPress or Drupal or Joomla or something and there's always that little, they'll log into the back end to make a change or add a blog post or something. There's always that little annoying number. It's like 4 updates needed or 20 updates needed, whatever. And people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. And sometimes if I run the updates, something will break because it's a plugin that's been updated or
hasn't been updated for 6 months or a year, and then it's going to break something.
It's going to break something because I did something else. Anyway, they just try and ignore it. But we've had so many clients come to us because something went wrong because they didn't update it. And they'll be in emergency mode because all of a sudden their resources library won't work or their donate functionality the donate form's gone.
Right.
Stuff like that. And so go ahead.
No, I mean, if they don't update that too, what's one of the easiest ways somebody hacks your site.
Totally.
Is when they don't update those plugins. And on WordPress specifically, I mean, we work with others, but we have a lot of clients on WordPress too, but they don't update those plugins. That's where the bad guys come in.
Oh, totally. And people don't know that most of the updates to plugins are not for fancy new functionality. Mm-mm. It's mostly plugging security holes.
It is.
So you got to do those. And so people don't, and they get hacked. So that's another one that you got to do, that all of our clients, we have on a schedule. So every week we're running the updates for all the sites.
That's awesome.
You just don't have to worry about it. But you don't need to hire someone like us to do it. You can really do it yourself, but you just want to do it on a testing environment first to make sure that the updates themselves don't break things that you have already built. Like if there's a new event system or whatever, you just want to make sure those things don't get broken. So you do want to do it on a dev site, and setting up a dev site is sometimes hard for people and stuff. So you may need somebody to help you with that, but you want to do that. So that's number two, which is probably, those two are most important. Number three, one of the things we have for all of our clients on maintenance, which you can do this yourself, is you want to do malware scans. So what you just said is a great point. You let's say you haven't updated your plugins for a while. Your site's been hacked. Oftentimes the hack will not be to steal your data. I mean, who cares about your data most of the time, unless you have private data on there. Most nonprofits probably don't.
And shouldn't.
And probably should if they do. That's sort of a different issue.
That's a different issue.
But often those hacks are to inject malicious code into the site, your header, your footer, to either insert links into the footer to increase the SEO value for other people, or to spread viruses, or to steal some keys, whatever. So you want to make sure that some service is scanning the code every once in a while to make sure that there is no malicious code in there. So we use a service called Sakurai, which is there are a lot of these. Sakurai is a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And it just lets us know, if there's anything suspicious that turns up in their every 6-hour scan, we'll get a ping and we'll go in and we'll check it out and we'll clean it out if need be. And if there has been a hack, you got to change all the passwords and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so out of the 75, I'll give you 3. Uptime,
3. Yeah. And like I said, there's 75, but those are 3.
Those are 3 good ones. Yeah. Got to do those. And I like talking about those too, because, hey, look, if you want to hire us to do it, we'll do it. We're happy. We love doing maintenance for nonprofits, but you can also do it yourself. I mean, you can, the Uptime service, there's a service called Uptime Robot we use that'll cost you $10 a month, right? The Sakurai service, that'll cost you a bit more, but you, and the updates you got to do yourself, but you it's a DIY type situation if you want it to be. Those 3 at least you can do, Anyway.
Yep. Absolutely. But it's, the challenge is always to stay ahead of the bad guys, and those things help you stay ahead of the bad guys, as well as backing up your site if you can, in case they do hack it, and then you have it. So
for sure. For backups is number 4. Yeah,
number 4.
For sure.
No, I threw in number 4. We did number 3, and then I threw in number 4. Awesome. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, tell me a few stories. I know that you were talked to you a little bit about Save the Children and what they're doing. Can you tell me a little bit about that organization and what you kind of been working with them on?
Yeah, totally. So Save the Children, some people know about Save the Children. It's a pretty big organization, international nonprofit. They have a ton of programs that they do. So that they fund and they arrange and they run. So some great people work there. Hillary is our contact there. She's awesome. She runs this project called Healthy Newborn Network, just an example. So they have a bunch of data about how to decrease the mortality of babies around the world. So child mortality, yeah, it's great. Child mortality has decreased over the last 20, 40 thousands of years. But a lot of those decreases are not spread equally across the world. And there is still more to do in terms of decreasing child mortality. So they have a program where they have gathered up academic data, articles, processes, research out what are ways to decrease child mortality. And some of them are really obvious, nutrition, and some of them aren't, like ways to do child delivery. If you are, let's say, in the middle of an environment where there isn't a lot of electricity, how do you decrease child mortality during delivery in those periods? So there's just a lot of information. And so they have put together this website, which we're redoing with them right now, which allows practitioners in those far-flung areas to get the information they need to decrease child mortality on the ground. So, for instance, they have documents about how best to manage young children in refugee camps, how best to help them thrive. And so for that kind of thing, I mean, it's great because they're really passionate about their mission. They're doing some this is not like one of those kind of up in the air,
that's right.
issue kind of talking issues. This is a real, thing that is going to affect people's lives on the ground. And they get like, all right, our website needs to work, right?
And they're international, right? I mean, they're
international,
and they're working with doctors on the ground. They needed information then, and they needed it quick.
And in a bunch of different languages, right? And they need it to load fast because there's not necessarily strong internet in these places. So anyway, and they want that, but again, so that's one of the audiences of that organization. And then academics who are creating research is another audience of that organization and that website, to sort of figure out what is being done and where the holes in the research are and what the past research is. So you've got another audience. And so they're really working hard to understand who those audiences are, what that website needs to do for those different audiences, with some weird requirements.
It is. And how each of those audiences need to navigate to the site, through the site, to get the information that they need and want, and what they want them to do. What problems do they solve, and how are they going to make those audiences' lives better, and then again, what do you want them to do or gain access to? So there's a lot of different funnels, I guess, from that site that you need to work through in that development of that site, which is a great opportunity, and also the different languages, the speed. There's a lot of important dotting I's and crossing T's that need to go in place for that particular project that you're working on. It sounds wonderful.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's really good. And it's funny because we do a lot of web projects for nonprofits. And some of them, like Hillary at HNN Healthy Newborn Network, I just talked about, she knows who the audiences are. She's really in touch with it.
Right.
Sometimes we'll get projects where an organization will come in and maybe they're newer, or maybe they are not entirely clear on what they're, what they want to say. And they will want the website to be about them. Like, hey, we are this organization. This is what we do. And here's what we do. And here's some examples of things we do. And check out this cool stuff we do. And that's great. That's the branding, right? That should be on the site. But what we're really trying to get people to do when we have those projects at the beginning is to say, all right, let's take the lens away from who you are and put it on that audience. So like, who is the audience? And there probably isn't one audience. There are probably multiple audiences for nonprofits. There always are. There are supporters. That's number one. And then there are perhaps people you're delivering services to. So you're building we built a website, for instance, to help this organization that educates public school teachers in New York City about how to best teach homeless kids. Because it turns out there's 100,000 homeless kids in the New York City public school system.
Oh my gosh.
Which is more than there are kids in the Austin, Texas public school system total. We have more homeless kids in the school system than they do. And by homeless, I mean people living in shelters or without not on the street, but
they don't have a stability home.
So there's a couple issues. They don't have stability at home. That's number one. They don't have
transit.
Their transit could be an issue. They don't have an address, like a physical address. So you can't mail stuff to them, which it seems like such an obvious thing, but it's a challenge. So anyway, this organization, they are they're helping teachers and educators figure out how to best handle that, because in every class there's going to be one or two shelter kids.
Right.
So, oh man, and now this is a podcast thing. Now lost my train of thought. I can't remember.
No, it's okay. Hopefully I didn't interrupt it.
No.
But building websites are ways. I mean, you have to speak in the way the folks that will receive it, and those teachers need to receive that information,
right,
and capture that information so that then they can then improve themselves. So that's exactly it's a science to it.
Right. You've brought me back to the point I wanted to make, which was yes. So you take the lens away from the organization itself. Hey, we help teachers do this, blah, blah. We help homeless kids, but you want to put it on the audience. And so the audience in that case is, all right, so there are teachers and educators who want to know how best to handle that situation. Right. And then you've got the parents of homeless kids,
right,
who also want to know. And so their interests are totally different, and they are looking for different resources, and they're looking for different things. And then you've got the supporters of the organization who are like, who want to champion this organization, which is doing great stuff and really needs to exist. And then you also have, it's also mostly funded by the state. And so you have government people who are coming in to figure out, hey, what are we funding and how are we funding it and how does it work? And does it meet the requirements that we have at the government level? So you've got it's more complicated than saying, what do we do? It's sort of, what do these audiences need? And how do you get them to what they need without getting them off track?
Right. And that definitely takes clarity, but it also takes a little bit to some the emotional triggers to actually, they want to get from here to there. And so if you use that language that shows that you're going to solve their problem, whether it's the parent, which is a different problem, like you said, than the teacher and you kind of make the teacher the hero by giving them this information in a way. And that's what you want to do as a nonprofit or a business. I mean, those who come to your site, you want to make them more about them than you.
Yes.
And which is always hard, because even people in our business, we always talk about our services, what we do, right? But it's you got to translate that into how we, you solve people's problems from the bad guys. You also help them put up a resource to, tell their story. So that's, you're solving their problem versus the web development. But I use web development all the time as far as those services go. Yeah. But it's just training ourselves to talk about the problem we solve.
Yeah, totally. And it's just, that's part of what I really like working about working with nonprofits and social change agencies too, is like that part's a little tricky, right? Because
it is,
because it's not tricky. It's not as obvious as I would like it to be a lot of the time.
Right.
So you want, if you're a nonprofit, you want your supporters to be the heroes, kind of.
Yes.
But you also want to serve the people that need what you're giving.
Yes.
To be the heroes too, kind of. But that's a bit weirder too.
It is. It's a hard thing. What are some mistakes that they make? I think what we were talking about, one mistake nonprofits make it, not necessarily think about those. Yeah. But what are some other mistakes that even we talked about, not taking care of your site? Yeah. not nice. Any other mistakes you think that
that's a good question. I would say a common mistake that we see people have when they come to us. We get a lot of people or organizations that have websites built already who are having trouble running them, or they're not really meeting their needs anymore. And so we're sort of taking over and helping shepherd them to a better place. Yeah. One of the mistakes we see a lot is not paying attention to this is gonna be a technical thing, not paying attention to the back end of the site. So how it's been made. Yeah. So you can, for instance, you can build a WordPress, Drupal, Joomla site. Yeah. Or you can really pay attention to how the staff is going to use it and build it in a way that makes it easier. So we get a lot of clients who come to us saying, this thing is impossible to use. It might work on the front end, but it's impossible for us to move modules around, right? We have a landing page and I can't put the content underneath the image. I have to put the image on top.
Something custom built within it. It's just a code mess.
And you get backends where you don't have control over how the pages are laid out, or it's basically, I had person talk about this the other day. It's basically like a Microsoft Word WYSIWYG or text box within structure that's like a frame that you can't change, things like that.
Right.
So one of the mistakes that I think people make is they really focus on what it's going to look like on the front end, and they don't think, hey, what is the flexibility that I need for going forward? And can my staff actually use this in a way that's not really, really difficult and frustrating?
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds like when you're, which is a great approach, is that you ask that question back to them, because sometimes they'll come to us and say, we want this, we want this, we want this. And you're like, well, you can have that customization, but how are you going to use that in the future? And is it going to be hard for you to edit? So I think that's a really important point, because nonprofits don't have budgets to have somebody, a full-time web development person, coding the site all the time. They need flexibility. So that's a really important mistake. I mean, I think that can, thinking about the ease of editing and creation as a primary want when you're doing a website.
Yeah, totally. And for, again, it's hard sometimes when you're going into a big project. A lot of nonprofits still use RFPs, which there's some debate about whether you should do that or not. And
I'm not a fan, but I know why.
Yeah, I get why people do it. And you can get a good result from an RFP. I mean, it's not impossible to do that, but you do need to know what you're looking for. I mean, it is quite easy for some agency to respond to an RFP with a proposal that focuses on the front end and has a process that's really opaque, and you don't know. And once they win the project, show you something and then build it without any input about how it's going to get built. And it's hard, unless you sort of know to look out for that. You can kind of end up at the end of the project with like, all right, they've hit the specs in the RFP, they've hit the KPIs or whatever, but this thing's like basically impossible to use, you know what I mean? And then they think, oh no, so it's, you just need to know going in, like, all right, so part of my RFP is going to be like, hey, let's talk about how the back end is going to be built and how we're going to use it. And can you please train us on the back end? And can we submit edits to how the back end works while we're testing it and stuff like that? Is that going to be part of the project or not?
Right. I was just looking at an RFP we were responding to for a nonprofit, and it has multiple WordPress sites of it. Then they want to know if they can integrate with this other software and this other software. And I'm like, we need to have a conversation about how you're using this and how you want to navigate it. But because it's an RFP, the partnership piece is missing for us to be able to kind of talk through about what the best practices on how they can or can't use those.
For sure.
The very integration tools in which they want. So
totally. It's even if your RFP is really long and really detailed, it's going to be hard to give us all the information that we need to give you. We're making a lot of assumptions when we write those proposals. I mean, we have experience. I mean, we know how to make assumptions. We know we're probably making the right ones in most cases, but it's impossible to know for sure unless you really get in and talk. But on the other hand, I get like organizations not going to go out and have like an in-depth conversation with 20 different vendors. Like that's just impossible for them to do. So I don't know, so I get why they do it, but
it's a process.
Yeah, for sure.
Shifting gears. I know it's the hot topic and we're in deep on AI. How do you see AI changing web development, for example? And we use it from a leveraging data standpoint. We use it from a lot of different ways, but web development, AI has a place. So any thoughts there or any insights?
Yeah, it's a good question. AI is a hot topic. And, in terms of web development, particularly, I mean, we're already using it in very limited ways to give us the basics when we're starting things. So we can, for instance, we did a project where we needed to add on to an organization's website. They had a WordPress website that ran pretty well and worked pretty well. They needed a membership area where they could let their partners log in and access particular data. So we've done this a million times, and we can easily write a plugin to give them a functionality to do that. Particularly, there's or use off the shelf plugins if that's possible. Anyway, but in this case, we needed to do something really particular that hadn't been done before. So AI cannot write that plugin for us, but what AI can do is give us the base file set that we need. So we can say, can you write a plugin that allows people to log in and there's a profile page and it allows them to update their name, address, and blah, blah, blah. And when it hits save, it sends an email to somebody. So it will give you like the basics of that, which maybe saves you 5-10 hours. You know what I mean?
Right.
But there's still a lot. I mean, that's just the basics, but there's still a lot of work that has to happen on top of that. So
sure is.
That's where we are in 2024, right? Like you can say, we can save maybe 10% of the time doing that right now.
Yeah.
But that's where we are now. You know what I mean? Maybe in the future it will continue to maybe get us 30% of the way there, 40% of the way there. The other point about that though is that's a functionality plugin that AI can help with. AI cannot yet do what we spend most of our time doing, which is, what is this site going to look like?
Yeah.
What is it? How is it going to work? And then let's translate those mock-ups that we've designed into a real landing page for this login screen for this membership area, for instance. Let's translate that. Let's build that out. AI cannot do that yet. It can't take a design and say, let's build this.
And I really think it's going to be hard for it being AI, to get to that human component of getting to the emotional triggers from a marketing standpoint. It will help and speed up more. I mean, we use it for code development, and I think that's where its strength is. It might also help with some creativity brainstorming, instead of having old school was having, you would have a bunch of people, you would ask their opinion about an idea. You can ask AI what's a good tagline for, or what's a good, so some of the words and copy can be brainstormed, but you still have to have the human component on the design side. We'll see. I'm not betting on it ever getting there.
I don't think it will. I mean, most of our work though is development. So we do some design when we need to. We also have partners that do design. We have a great designer on staff. So we do that. But someday I wonder if, let's say we get a mock-up for that login page, for instance, from our designer, if we can say, AI, build this out in a WordPress template. You know what I mean? That would, and if we could, it would reduce the cost, right? It would reduce the cost for nonprofits trying to do that. It would make it faster for us to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not against it at all, because that's not really something a human needs to do. You've already designed it. You just want it to work in HTML as well. I don't know. We'll see if we can get there. Maybe someday.
There are some themes in WordPress that are working towards AI. I don't know if you've ever used Elementor.
Yeah, but, for sure. And again, those. Go ahead.
They're trying.
They're trying, and I think they'll get to a point where if you're just starting out, you may want to use that. It's always going to, at least right now, it's pretty generic what it can do. Like, it's pretty generic looking. It's not necessarily, I don't think an organization who is comfortable with a generic looking template design is gonna want to, it's great if you're starting out like this week, you need a thing. But once you have an identity, once you have an idea what you want to do, in your unique organization, I'm not sure it's going to really work for a long term,
No,
but who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? I'm happy to get.
We're all riding the ride. I mean, similar to, like you said, I mean, back in 99, I can remember, oh gosh, I missed that curve of innovation. I mean, I think we're kind of in that time period of, we're just in for a new ride. We'll see how things kind of go.
Yeah. We'll see. And the other thing is there, our nonprofits are often concerned about, are there ethical issues with AI? So there's a lot.
There is a lot of debate.
Totally. And so for this one, when we're talking about translating a design into code, for instance, are there ethical issues? I mean, you don't get the ethical issues with like copying people's data and like, is it okay to use, someone else's what would work to like pull in as a learning tool or something. You don't get those, but you do get the like, well, are you, what does that do to people whose job it is to code, and what are the structural issues related to that? And so there's also some concerns, that way too. What if I don't know.
Yeah. I think I look at it as it's going to help us maybe do our job better. I just don't think, the human component of helping these companies or organizations move forward is going to be just as critical, especially with how much information's out there, and so you have to bring in the human component. So I'm hoping it's going to make us better, not take our jobs away. But we'll see. I could be wrong.
I don't. You know what? I mean, I think we'll just help. look, like you're into technology. You guys handle a lot of the technological stuff. So do we.
We do.
It's like a tool, you know what I mean? And like
it is a tool.
So are websites.
Exactly
I mean,
right.
we're helping nonprofits with web technology. Web technology is a tool. Like it's not a thing for its own right. It's because it's helping them accomplish their mission. That's why they have it. So So if AI can be part of that tool mix that helps them accomplish their mission, then that will be our job, is to like help them leverage that. You know what I mean? So
Yep. I totally agree. It is another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
But it's hot, and I had to bring it up because it's the hot topic of 2024 and beyond and we'll see anyway.
Totally.
Is there one last question? And I really appreciate you giving me your time, and I hope we can talk again, because I know we both have a passion for nonprofits, and your story is an interesting one. I didn't ask you though. Hang on, before I do my last question, what made you go from being a lawyer in a big firm to starting this company that you have for 10 years?
Well, let's see. It was 2006, and I had worked for a big law firm in New York City for a couple of years, and it wasn't as terrible as people say. It wasn't like I was working 18 hours a day, and I was 25, and I was like, this is whatever.
Right.
And I liked aspects of it. I liked the writing. For instance, we wrote some great motions and that were really interesting, but I felt that the work I was doing was both too stressful and not important enough. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, if I'm going to be tearing my hair out and working so hard and stressed all the time, it's got to be something that matters. And I was doing a case at the time. I was I was the youngest person. So I was doing all the stuff that no one else wanted to do, which included reviewing a million emails. But it was that people in this company, our job as lawyers for this big law firm was to defend companies. That was our job. So big companies would hire us because they get sued all the time. They get sued for everything from someone falling in the store in the lobby of a Citibank to big securities things where they've underwritten the stock and the stock has gone down and somebody sues them because of that, because they lost money or blah, blah, blah. So we're always defending. We're defending these big corporations. And I remember one of the cases was a hedge fund. Our client was the hedge fund. They had purchased a boat factory in Wisconsin because they thought it would make money. And right before they purchased the boat factory, the union that worked there negotiated a new contract with the owners of the boat factory that gave them healthcare. And then when our client came in, they bought the boat factory and they wanted to get out of this contract because they didn't want to give them healthcare because it was too expensive. And their argument, so they stopped giving them healthcare. The union sued them. We defended them, saying we had the right to remove their healthcare because it wasn't us that signed the contract. It was the previous owner that signed the contract. And I remember spending a whole weekend in Tompkins Square Park in New York City, which is close where I live. I had a girlfriend at the time who I wanted to hang out with, and there was a concert and we were there, and I was sitting there reviewing. I was stuck at this concert. She was listening to music. I was reviewing stacks of emails about how these guys were going to remove the healthcare for their employees. And I'm like, this is a mess. What is going on here?
What am I doing?
What am I doing? Why am I doing this? This is terrible on many reasons, and there's the personal reason. There's the what I'm doing to the world reason. And poor Maureen Wiley, who's who I haven't spoken to in 20 years and lives in Seattle, was sitting there bored.
You're reading all these emails
about how we're going to screw over the union. And at the time, I have to give a shout out to my friend Ryan, who runs an organization in DC called Soapbox Engage, which helps nonprofits with CRMs. He wanted to hire me to run the New York office of his company. So
awesome. Ryan,
so I was like, thank you. I am in. I am so in. And that's where I got really involved in nonprofit technology. So it was basically a new career, a lot less money, but it finally felt like, all right, look, if I'm working hard, I'm doing it for something that is going to be good, is going to be worth working for, as opposed to these dudes shutting down the healthcare at their boat factory, which was a huge drag. So
thank you for giving me that story. It's a good one. And it's one that a lot of people should hear because, No, I mean, not about the boat factory or what they were doing, but just sit there and self-evaluate. This is not really how I should be spending my time.
How did my life end up? Yeah, I was like, what? How did this happen?
Right.
But yeah, and it's those jobs, right, that I think people that really burn people out, the ones that are high stress, low meaning.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
Yeah. So now we have a high stress, but high meaning because we're running our own companies. But anyway.
Yeah, the stress level is just the same, still there.
Okay.
but at least there's a purpose.
There is a purpose. So one last question, and what was a final? This is proof point, and do we want to leave with our listeners, especially as it relates to those who you serve, and any takeaways?
Oh, from this podcast?
Yeah, from this podcast or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, I don't know.
One.
yeah. If you need marketing help, hire Proof Digital.
Oh, that's awful nice of you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Because you guys clearly know what you're doing. I did speak to our host before the show. Just listeners. I did speak to our host before the show. So I know her a little bit. Yeah. Good people over there. Good people over there. That's the takeaway.
Thanks. Thanks for the shout out. Appreciate it. Same thing for Ben. He's working with nonprofits. I mean, you heard the story about Save the Children. There's so many stories beyond that, and just love. Again, you're helping them just dot their I's and cross their T's that they need to do to elevate their organizations. I mean, more than that, but I mean, it's just those things that help so they can focus on what they do best. We've been talking to Ben Freda with BFC Digital. Ben, thank you for joining the Proof Point podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to the Proof Point podcast. We'll see you again next time. And be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.